All right. So Nicola, correct?
Yes,
So
sir.
Nicola, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me about what it is you're doing, what you're currently doing, a little background about yourself and what you'd like to be doing.
So, sorry, I just had a cough drop. Um, I'm a graphic designer. I recently moved from New Jersey to Florida.
We're in
Um,
Jersey.
Morristown.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in that area.
That
Howell, Jackson, back and forth between the city, Jersey City, so I'm familiar.
that is so cool. Um, but I was doing graphic design. I moved here. It was during the pandemic, so there was a lot of remote work. So I worked for Zillow at the time, uh, being a floor plan annotator. Not really design heavy. And then I just recently got laid off due to the recession. So I've been doing remote work. I've been trying to get into freelancing, but it's been a tough market. So instead, I've been trying to work on my work and fix up my portfolios. So yeah.
Gotcha. And give me a little background. So Zillow, I mean, did you go to school for design? When did you start? Give me a little background in terms of experience of like how long.
Okay. So I started doing graphic design in high school, my senior year of high school. Um, I took a class in high school and I just fell in love with it, like the whole process, all the tools that we used. And so I decided I'm going to be a graphic designer. So I went to William Patterson University, uh, and I did my BFA in fine arts with a concentration in
Really
graphic
P.
design.
Okay.
Huh?
Is that okay? And was so since graduating, has Zillow been sort of like your only position since then?
Oh no, I've done e-commerce for a company. I was their designer for basically like photo editing, not really too much like design based like layout designs and stuff. They just wanted their product shots that I took and put it into an image they would choose from. So basically just like polish their image. And then before that, I did an internship with Luxor Linens, and that was more so design based. I did web blasts, I did email blasts, I did package design, which one of the packages actually went in Bed Bath and Beyond, um, which was cool. That was like my oh my god moment.
Things are in
Um,
the real world. Yeah.
yeah,
Cool.
and so I did have prior experience before Zillow. So now I'm trying to look for more jobs now in the design field. So
What kind of work do you want to be doing? Because it sounds like you're
oh god.
commerce where you're editing photos
Uh, John,
and
this
Zilla, you do package for this internship that you use. Uh,
John, can you hear me? Oh god. Should I stop?
okay. What I was trying to say before we dropped out, you've done design in a bunch of different areas, right? You've done some photo editing, you've done some floor plan stuff with Zillow, you've done some packaging stuff. Like, what gets you excited? Like, ultimately, what is it, the stuff that you want to continue to make? Because I know, like, we kind of fall into these jobs when we're younger, where we're kind of just looking for experience, and we do whatever it is we have to do. And I've been there. I've done that. But how do we start to get to the, like, how do we not forget the things that we actually enjoy doing, and how do we get to that point? So what is that? What are some of the things that you'd want to be doing more of?
Um, I so I worked with a recruiter a while ago, and he gave me an assignment to do, which was layout design for a 17 magazine, and it's in my portfolio. But the whole process of doing it, I was having a blast. Like, I had we had to go back and forth, seeing what could work, what cannot work. And then obviously I got the final product, and looking back at it, I'm like, I want to do this again. Oh,
So that was kind of like your first time in, like, editorial design, technically.
yeah,
Can you hear me?
it's kind of like
So that was
choppy.
like your first time, say, quote unquote, doing like edit. Fuck, man. Today is just not a good day for Wi-Fi here. Let's see if I turn off my camera, if that helps. Any better?
Let's see.
No, it's not any better, is it? Jesus Christ,
Take
Wi-Fi
three.
today. Yeah. Sorry about this, man. I know it's like what, Sunday night for you?
Yeah, no problem. I have nothing to do.
Um, okay, so this was like your first time doing like editorial design, right?
Yeah,
But in the same way, what I would kind of also acknowledge is that, like, this is your potentially, in a sense, like, this was your first time working with, like, within sort of like a brand asset situation of, like, this is what 17 magazine looks like. Create something that aligns in that sense, right?
yeah,
So it was a little bit more in line with like a graphic design role, and not just a role where you could use your graphic design skills to do X, Y, and Z. So that probably felt also really good. Who was the recruiter, by the way? Was it with like a specific company, or was it just like kind of some random?
I found him on LinkedIn, and I shot him a message, and we did a Zoom like this, and he looked at my portfolio, and he was like, wow, you really need to like clarify what you want, because if I sent you my old portfolio, there was like photography, there was fine art, there was like a
Sure,
bunch of
yeah.
things. It was like the college portfolio that you'd make. So then that's when I took his advice, and I was like, okay, let me put stuff that I actually want to focus on. So like I have logo designs, I've had poster and brochures and um package design. So I'm in the aspect of, design itself, like graphic design related, more so
Gotcha.
like photography or fine arts, even though
Gotcha.
I could
Okay.
still do those.
Yeah, and that makes sense. What happened after this conversation with that recruiter? So like you completed the exercise. What was sort of the next steps, or what happened?
After that, we kind of just like made way, I guess, because like he
Hmm.
got very busy with his recruiting.
Hmm.
So I didn't want to bother him as much. So then I tried figuring things out myself, and like making projects. But like for me, I don't have that like creative mind that's like, oh, I'm gonna make this. I need somebody to tell me, listen, I need this to look like this, and then I will execute it. Like I'm
Sure, yeah.
more so along the lines of, I need this.
Technical.
Yeah,
Technical, yeah. You have sort of the execution mindset of like, tell me the objective and I'll figure out how to get there. Not so much coming up with the objective and then figuring out, which I get, I totally get that. Um, there is like, I mean, kind of akin to, I'm sure, a little bit of the conversation. I think, like, there probably is a place where you can continue to practice. Um, you've mentioned, so like, tell me a little bit about what you are doing today. So you got laid off. I understand that. Are you applying to jobs and then you're also trying to freelance? Like, tell me a little bit about that.
So I've been applying to jobs, and I've been getting interviews, but like the weird part is like every interview I get, like I would get rejected, but then they're like, you have like the qualifications for the job. So I'm like, wait, then what happened? And like sometimes I would reach out to them and be like, hey, is there any advice you could give me um for my next interview? And most of the time they're like, you nailed the interview. And then that questions me as to like what happened? Like why didn't I get the job then if nailed the interview? So that's what's been like hitting me right now. But I have applied. I live next to Disney, so I applied there, and I have an interview. And the good thing about Disney is, this is not an advertisement. I'm just saying, uh, they do 100% tuition, so I might take up that opportunity and go back to school for a master's in graphic design, or maybe go into art therapy because I do love helping people a lot. So
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with continuing to expand. And I think the people I've spoken with that I've admired that have done their masters, you do learn a lot, which is really cool as well. Um, okay. So when is this interview with Disney?
May 15th.
May 15th. Okay, so 10 days. And what's the role exactly that you have the interview for?
So it's not anything design related. It's just a simple job. Um, but the thing with Disney is like there's internal um job openings, I guess. So like
Of course, yeah.
um you could apply to Disney to be a graphic designer, but chances are you could get rejected so quick. But if you're working for the company already, they could look into you more and maybe
Of
choose
course, yeah.
you. So my hope is, get into the company, go into their photography department, and then be able to like show and work with photographers and see like show my opportunity of how I am as a worker.
So it's a photo role,
Yeah.
focused role. Okay. I mean, again, you have experience. It's funny how this works, right? It's like you studied to be a graphic designer, you want to be a graphic designer, and then you ended up getting jobs in photo. And that is the thing that stands out, right? Now, obviously, applying to Disney is great. It's a huge opportunity. I would take anything that they threw at me. Believe me, I'd go dress up in a costume if it meant that I would be inside of Disney, and have the opportunities that, like you're saying, come across the desk. So let's approach this conversation and figure out like how do we nail that? How do we really like communicate? Now, I would say this, I'm not a photo person. I've worked with photography before, so you're going to know better than I do. But in terms of an interview, um, I would say, there are things that you want to make sure that you focus on and things that you want to talk to, as with any other interview, no matter what it is, and especially, well, at least with creatives, you want to focus on a couple of things, um, and make sure that stands out and not focus too much on the technical stuff. So go ahead and pull up here. Portfolio. I know we have a bunch of design stuff. Now, because you're going to be going to interview with Disney with a more photocentric role, what do you think is your plan of attack? Somewhat. Have you been thinking about it at all? Like,
So for the Disney position, it's not photography yet. It's more so just like so the position is parking attendant, but like I'm probably gonna try doing like a week at least and then transfer into photography. So like that way I could get into the position, if that makes
okay,
sense.
okay, okay. So never mind. Scratch that whole thing I just said.
But
Okay, so then let's look at your portfolio and then figure out some things that we can do here. Um, what should I click on here?
you choose.
No, you tell me. You got to talk about it. So,
Um, yeah, let's start off top with 17 magazine. This is the layout design I did with the recruiter, the
okay.
creative recruiter.
Yep.
Some of the mock-ups were like weird that I picked for some reason. Like I think all the way on the bottom, you could see it like on the bottom, it's not as aligned.
Sure, yeah.
But like that's the mock-up. But like when I designed it layout wise, it fit perfectly.
Yeah. So a few things, right? Immediately, and I just want to click into a couple other projects as well. American housing. See, everyone loves to put these together.
Nice, simple. I didn't want to go overboard with mock-ups with this one.
Yeah, so a few things, right? I think one, I'm not super familiar with William Patterson's program, but I think there's opportunity for you to really start to explore graphic design outside of, I mean, like in where do you look for inspiration? Like, do you look at other graphic design? Are you looking at other designers? You know, everyone, yes, you can be a graphic designer, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are in the world. You know, it's like you know how to do these things, but your focus or attention is placed elsewhere. So I'm just curious, like for you as a, someone who has done graphic design, like what do you look at? Like what is the stuff that you think is interesting?
So with the inspirations, actually my one friend you actually had on here. Um his name is David. But
David,
he
what?
David Garcia.
Garcia. Okay.
Um he and I would always like send each other like, oh, watch this YouTube video of this graphic designer making whatever it is, or do this design challenge. Um
Mhm.
and he actually told me about you on TikTok. So I said,
Mhm.
you know what? Let me give him a shot. Let me see what he could help me with, because I do need help with this. Like I truly love design. I don't want to give it up. It's just a tough competitive field. Um,
Yes.
but we always like push each other to the limit, making sure like we don't give up.
And that's good to have. I very much do the same with my friends, my design friends as well. Um, so I would say this, like, I think you need to expand on what you're looking at. I think you need to think about, again, like really question, like, what is it that you like to do? And yes, the recruiter who handed you the 17 magazine layout project, right? Like, again, I think it wasn't so much that you love editorial design. I think it's more so like, hey, here's the brand, and build something that represents this, right? And I think that's the beginning of kind of like what I'm saying as like, I think you need to seek out not more opportunities, but more um what I'll call like heroes, design heroes, people that you think are really talented or really, like they make amazing work. And in a way, you want to kind of make work
Porch.
like that,
Yeah.
you know? Because I think that's going to help you really understand, you know, what like it's going to give you sort of like a goal that you want to work towards and start to build up that skill towards, right? Because a lot of the work that I have, not that it's bad, that I'm seeing, not that it's bad, but I think it's like the beginning of your design experience, right? And I don't want to tell you to continue to spin your wheels and make projects without kind of almost educating yourself a little bit about like what else is out there and what is the stuff that you can be making and how you can be making that. Because again, you've been working in your experiences has been working in companies and gaining that responsibility and gaining that experience of what it's like to work within a company. And that's great because that is, you know, very much a skill that people overlook, learning those soft skills, how to deal with other people within the company, how to have conversations, how to have meetings, stuff like that. Um, and they usually focus all on the technical ability and just like, hey, I need to get really good at this and I need to get really good at that, blah, blah, blah. And that's all fine and dandy. I will say that, like, for me personally, I realized probably 3 or 4 years after like me graduating school, like, okay, cool, like this is what I'm good at, and I don't need to continue to like figure out the most easiest, hackiest way in Illustrator to make a logo anymore. I need to like work on the skills that are talking with people that are in companies that are using design to elevate their business or using design to further their objective, whatever that may be. And that's where I kind of continue to focus. And I think in a way, you can do somewhat of the same in terms of expanding what sort of design you look at. I think, like, have you heard of Aaron Draplin?
No.
Okay, so this is a dude who's going to be a great example of a designer who is like just a badass dude, and design is very much who he is as a person. But it's not because like he's a nerdy graphic designer. It's because he just loves making things and he loves helping people. And I think I'll send over some references as well for him. He has this one, here, I'll share my screen. I've shared this before in another review. He has this one, project that he talks about, one of his YouTube videos that I think is always great. And he had this friend where his friend wanted to start a hot dog stand. And he's like, man, I need a logo. And he was like, all right, well, I'm going to make you this logo. I'm going to do it basically the way I want to do it, but I'm going to make it this awesome thing, right? And I don't know if he had the name already or what, but I'm pretty sure it was like he did it for nothing. And he's like, man, I just want, whenever I show up, just give me like free hot dogs or something like that. But he made this badass logo. And the story is really great. I would recommend you taking a look and looking into it. But he just like, it was just this thing where he wanted to make like the best possible thing for his friend. And he used design to really do that, and like he's a great guy. I remember this is one of the first designers I ever learned about when I was in school, and became very much an inspiration for me in my early days. And I think listening to him talk, looking at some of his work would be great for you as well. Another person to look at, have you heard of Michael Bierut?
Sounds familiar.
So he's a big name as well. Michael Bierut is one of the heads of Pentagram. Pentagram is one of the top design agencies in the world. And to listen to him speak about design is also really, really useful, and will also teach you a lot as well, because I think, again, this was someone I looked at for inspiration. There's a great Netflix show or documentary, I don't know what you want to call it. It's called Helvetica. Look it up, watch it. I would recommend watching it in your free time because it's great, and also has made me one of the cult followings of Helvetica as a typeface anyway. But I mean, again, I think these are people that I learned about and looked at and said, wow, like I'm really impressed with their work. I really want to, this is the level of work that I would like to one day work towards. And I don't know about that now necessarily. I did for a while want to work at a place like Pentagram. Pentagram Design, they make amazing work, and they're an agency out of New York. And they are just the quality of work that they do is really phenomenal. But again, like having all of these references and starting to look at all of this different design will start to get into your head a bit of like, man, I really like this, or I really like that. How do I make stuff like this, or how do I explore? And you'll start to imitate a bit, and that's fine because you'll start to figure out like, oh, for this, how did they use a typeface like this, and how are they using imagery, and how are they using color? All of that stuff is going to be super helpful, and you're going to want to learn more about it. You're going to want to practice it and do it yourself, and eventually you'll start to actually employ it in your own work. And I think this will be super helpful. And like I said, I'll send over some references in the notes. So to really quickly go back to your portfolio, 1 second. We can go over some like quick things that I think are really important. So one, when I go into a project on your portfolio website, I think you should figure out a core structure of how your projects will look. So for example, you started doing it here where you have a heading. Well, I feel
Yeah,
like
it's
they vary from place to place, right? It's like some you have a heading and a description, you have a heading image, and then maybe you should have a description, whatever. You should figure that layout out. But in general, when I click into a project, I should have a couple of things immediately. I should have the name of the project, which you do, and potentially consider why these things are repeated. Oh, this is an image, so that's one thing, like figure out how to get this stuff onto the page. Next thing is I should have a sense of like what the objective was. And now I know, for example, like 17 magazine, this was something that was assigned to you as like an exercise, but you can run with this a bit, right? You can say something along the lines of, I was tasked with designing multiple magazine spreads for 17 magazine. The focus was around this movie or this whatever that, like, yes. And at the end you could say this was an assignment for X, Y, and Z, to kind of
yeah,
say like to not to make it known that you're not necessarily working for 17 magazine. You can always say something, like this was self-initiated to practice my editorial layout and get better at that. But my point is, you whether this was self-initiated or not, you want to like think of the high level kind of objective here, like the key point. It's like 17 magazine is a big brand. I was focusing on, one direction for X, Y, and Z spread. And the challenge was to align these spreads to their new album release that was coming out in the spring, and so I used elements that were hand drawn and had tape or whatever, like that's when you start describing it. When you read something that was like, hey, I was assigned a project having to deal with magazine spreads. Great. Like
yeah,
we're not really presenting it in like a nice business case. We're not presenting it in a nice professional case. It's just like, yeah, I got to sign this thing. Great. And that doesn't really do anything for anyone, right? So we want to think about that when we're trying to write these descriptions for projects. Let's see.
that was
How.
an actual client. This one.
So I was commissioned by the business to do design logo for the company. Client wanted the logo to resemble plumbing, but in addition. Sure. So yeah, I like this is another example we can kind of take apart, right? Like I was commissioned by the business to design a logo for their company. Great. Another way of looking at it is I worked with Sure Thing Plumbing to develop the branding and look and feel for their business. Prior to working with me, the company had no logo, but was looking to expand their clientele in the Long Island area, blah, 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 blah. While working with the owner, we discovered that they really wanted to build a logo that not only communicated plumbing, but also their relationship to the shore or their vicinity. I don't know the phrasing, the vicinity to the shore, and things like that.
Yeah.
We kind of like want to wordsmith this stuff a bit. We do want to be a little bit whimsical, but we also want to think of like, yes, graphic design, you make logos, great. But what is that logo doing for the client? Like what is that logo like what is the core need of a logo? Well, it's to start to look like a business. It's to start to actually expand clients. It's to win more business for business, for business owners and things like that. And it's more than just I designed a logo. It's you help this business grow, So we start to think about all those things, and we start to actually get them on the page and figure out how we want to present that when we're writing these descriptions in our portfolio website. I took upon the challenge and another logo above. Yeah. So like, like we know this is the final thing. We don't need to write just to fill up the page to have that stuff, right? If anything, another thing to consider now, I'm not a big fan of Adobe Portfolio. I have a few recommendations, but I'm not going, again, I don't want to have you spin your wheels just to get the stuff. Like basically at the core of what my suggestion is like, if you can get text on the page rather than burning text into these images,
Yeah.
do that.
Okay.
Because what I was about to say was, like, you don't need to have everything in one paragraph. And if you are able to, with Adobe Portfolio, have like text throughout, like a mix of like text, image, text, then you can actually start speaking to some of these images. So like, this should probably be your description at the top of the page. Then you can talk about the color palette. So, since they are close to the shore, I wanted to use shades of blue that represented the ocean and this and that, blah, 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 blah. You could talk about typography. We need to start getting rid of these things. This is like, and this is what I mean by looking also at more design as well, because I think everyone right now, when we're starting off, loves a moment of like, this is the color palette and this is the typography. Yes, but we're not doing that just for the sake of exposing that stuff, right? And we're usually not doing that. There's usually some sort of meaning behind it, right? Whether the color palette is, there's a lot of different options, whether we're using multiple typefaces, it has to kind of like, there just needs to be a little bit more intention behind it, I think. So we can get rid of stuff like this. And what I think you could also, something like this could appreciate is kind of pushing the design a bit, or pushing, yeah. So this project's already done. Could you go back and maybe think about, okay, well, it's a business card. Does the business card does it need to have this like kind of rectangle in the middle that is creating these borders? Does it need this framing? Can we apply that logo to a t-shirt? And can we go, because like a company like this is going to need quote unquote uniforms and stuff like that. Can we have a couple more applications that we're looking at? Let's see. What's this? Okay, so this is something that I like to talk about as well, where we have stuff that we just make sometimes, we're just experimenting, we're just messing around, whether this is for clients or for not. And rather than bucketing it under a project, right? Because essentially, like the way we've presented this is that like these are all projects that you've worked on, and then this is the catch-all for all the other stuff that I worked on. And so there's an expectation here. When I click onto it, I should have like some sort of description here, but instead it's just like, here's just a bunch of stuff I've made in the past, right? So how do we present this work differently from the stuff that you've actually taken a little bit more time on, right? Not to say that you didn't spend time on this, but that is has a little bit more depth behind it. And I think like this is where something like an Instagram comes in, or potentially like another page where it's just like labeled blog or like sketchbook or whatever it may be, where you're just kind of like showing designs that you're making frequently or infrequently that you can reference, if you ever need to say, yeah, when I'm not doing stuff for clients, this is also some of the stuff that I mess with. For me, it's always it's always about intention and how you present these things. And I think when you start to, you're setting an expectation for someone to click into it, to want to learn more about these things in a sense, right? Whereas if we were to put this on like a separate page that's labeled as blog or something, or sketchbook, again, whatever you want to label it, you could call it Idea Lab for all I care. That's kind of signal to them that this is separate from the work that you've taken your time and you worked with more than, you worked with clients or whatever it may be for your job, yeah, so I'm gonna pause there. I'll ask if you have any questions or anything like that, or anything specific that you want to talk about. I know I kind of went on a little bit of a rant there, so my fault.
No, you're good. I'm taking mental notes right now. I actually need this, like I love critiques. I love expanding and learning more about design. So this is very helpful and useful to me. So I thank you for that. I don't even have any questions. Is there anything, I guess, I should expand on based on the skills in my portfolio that you saw? Or like, do you see something I'm strong in?
I don't want to say like, hey, you're strong in this, and like that's. I think you're very early on in your career, and if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I am 26.
Okay, you're young as a designer, right? And you've already had a couple roles like we've talked about where you've in a way have gotten experience, which is valuable, but it wasn't directly for graphic design. It was kind of just, like working in photo, and I'm not discrediting that at all. I think that's great. And that's still going to be valuable for you one day. Like I just spoke with a designer the other day who was literally in the same situation as you. He worked in a lot of like real estate, photography, marketing, like photo marketing, editing, stuff like that. Like wasn't directly tied to graphic design. And we had a review, and the following week he had an interview with Alpha League, which is a big gym fitness brand out of Texas. And he over time was like, yeah, eventually I started learning about graphic design and I started combining the two. And I figured now I want to be a graphic designer, or I want to do more of that stuff. And I said, listen, that's great, but you have this experience that you've been able to really start to like learn about, and you probably are a lot better than most about photo editing, or treating photos, or how do you work with photography and stuff like that. And that is going to play a big part in your future opportunities, right? Because you're going to be able to say, yeah, like I can do graphic design, and I also really know how to work with imagery, and I know how to like treat photos, and I know how to do this, and I know how to do that. And I know what to look for when it comes to product shots or making those things look really good. And so that stuff is all super valuable. What I would say now is you have an opportunity to figure out to like what sort of design you want to start integrating into that experience, right? Whether that be branding, whether that be, working with information such as editorial design, whether that is building websites, whatever that is, like you have this moment to do that. Now, I don't know what your financial situation is. I don't know, like if you are, you need a job tomorrow. But you have a moment where you can start to really ask yourself, like, okay, what is the design that I really enjoy looking at or want to create more of? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, 100%.
I I know that's not like I don't want to say, hey, go start making more projects. I don't want you to start spinning your wheels. I want you to figure out first like what it is. I want you to have a focus first. Cause I can tell you, hey, listen, you're great at this editorial stuff. Go make some more editorial stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's going to be super helpful. I think you need to go look at a lot more design work. I think you need to and they, just like really start to question that. When we're younger, we're just like we don't really ask ourselves what it is that we like to do necessarily. And I think that's super important. It took me a while to do that. And to that to what I was saying before of like it's funny how some of these early roles you'll have will help shape what you do in the future. Some of my early ones I hated, and I decided immediately that I never wanted to do that stuff, Now, I'm not saying you absolutely loved what you did, but you can think about that and figure out, okay, what do I like about these that I want to continue doing? And then what is it that I want to start learning more about or start like doing more of this one thing, whatever it may be.
Yeah. No, no, I totally get you. Um, I forgot to mention, one of my friends who's a graphic designer in New York, actually told me that his company is looking for a package designer, and because their package designer is slacking, and their company doesn't really like him, so he told them about me. They sent my work to them, and they're I'm basically on the bench, so I'm just waiting for this moment. But that's something I'm looking forward to. But I am still going to look into books. My professor actually sent me books to look into, like graphic design books. Um, but yeah, I feel like getting out of college, they were just like, okay, you graduated. Here's your degree. Here's graphic design. There you go. Boom. You're in the world. So it's like, it's tough. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I like, what I don't like. That's why every time somebody asks me, um, what do you want to do in graphic design? I say I do everything. Because like I can do everything, but I'm just like in that mindset, like, what do I really want to do?
Well,
And
that's the thing too, is so we have this thought that we can do everything. So I spoke with a designer last week that was we were talking about his resume, and on his resume he had this section where it's just like these are all the skills that I have. And I was reading through them and I was like, so you do UI UX after we had looked at his website and his work already. And I said, so you do UI UX design? And he said, he didn't immediately respond. I said, you don't do UI UX design. You're just kind of like putting it up there. And again, that to your point, it's kind of like we don't really ask ourselves what it is that we like to do, what it is that we want to do. Yes, in theory, we could
yeah,
learn in a couple of days how to do this thing, but
yeah,
it's not something that we do that we're doing now to really say, like, I have done this before and I feel confident in doing it. Right. So that's another thing. Like, what do you feel most confident in working with? Right. That's another thing that I think everyone needs to, I think is really helpful, is that like, yes, graphic designers have this ability to do a lot of different things. I could do character design if I really, really tried, but I'm not because I don't like doing it. I don't feel confident doing it. And I
same.
never will say at this point, I will never say like, I like if anyone asked me, hey, can you draw me a t-shirt with like I remember I did this once. I had someone ask me to draw them a t-shirt for like a trip that they were going on for the weekend and it had like alligators on it or something like that. They wanted like an alligator sports team. And I was like, yeah, sure, I can do this for a couple bucks. Never again will I do that because it's not fun for me. I don't enjoy it. I don't feel confident doing it. And I don't want to do things that I don't feel confident in, especially when it comes to my job. So since, again, back to that point of like, ask yourself, like, sure, you can do all these things. You can learn how to do all these things, but what is it you truly feel confident in? And what do you like to do?
Oh, is that to me? A
Just
question to me, or
not
just in general?
just in general,
Yeah,
just something to think about.
yeah. No, that's always in my head. Always.
To that point of when you come out of school, yeah, you're kind of in the situation where you're just like, I'll take anything, again. I think I did get lucky where I wanted to work in branding and marketing. Not marketing, but I did want to work in branding, and branding happens to go with marketing. So anyway, I did get lucky after school where I had a job, a contract for 6 months, 2 weeks out of school, and that was a signal to me while doing that work. I was like, I like doing this. I want to continue doing this. But then I had jobs after that I hated. I had a job where I was just making digital ads for brands, like literally banner ads that you had on your website. You see that you absolutely hate. I made those for like a year and a half and just hated it. I said, okay, I'll never do this again. But the bright side of that was that it was a digital role. It was considered digital because it was in tech, because it was in an ad tech company. And that got me my next job where I was making websites and more branding for another really good, awesome company, and sometimes we have to kind of go through these early tough years of like taking whatever we can to get that experience. But again, it's going to play back into it's going to help shape and point you in the direction that you ultimately want to be doing.
Yeah. And with experience, like I always get scared when I see like when I apply to a job, they're like, oh, you need 5 years experience. But then it's like for a junior role, but I don't have that experience, I guess. So like how do I go about that?
Yeah,
Is
so job applications are usually shit. I've always found. I'm quite harsh when it comes to this. Like, I think I've always thought there's a disconnect between the people writing the job application and the people that like for the department that needs it, because it's usually like HR. They're usually asking someone to write the application or the requirements. That person's usually lazy, and then they usually end up just like rehashing something that they've done before. Now, at the moment, the market is also really in a flux because like every company is looking to get the most bang for their buck, where they're like, okay, if we can find someone that has a shit ton of experience and then still put them as a junior designer, like that means we can pay them less and we can get more out of them. So there's that. If it is a junior graphic designer, junior role, and they're asking for 5 years experience, I'd still apply and I'd be like, you guys are fucking crazy, asking for 5 years experience, because, that's ridiculous. Also, there's a couple of things you need to like look at, like, okay, what company is this? What is their structure in terms of roles? Is a junior graphic designer someone that does have 5 years and the next role up is a senior graphic designer? Like you don't know all those intricacies, but don't let that stop you, because at the end of the day, that doesn't necessarily mean technical ability. That means like, how many years have I spent working with companies, or how many, like, what's like you mentioned to me that you had an internship, you worked with Zillow, and then you had this other company that you worked with, right? Great. That's 3 roles in 3 different business situations that you have experience in. And that says a lot. It shouldn't stop you from saying, oh, well, I don't really have 5 years experience, so I can't really apply for this stuff. I think like I would throw my job app in for all those places, but I think the one thing that helps, if you are unsure about this stuff, try to go a step further and try to figure out how you can get in touch with that hiring manager, or that recruiter, or whoever, and have a discussion of like, hey, I saw you had an open role. I sent in my application. Here's my resume. I was just curious if you think that, my experience might be a valuable add to your team and what you guys are currently doing. There's nothing
yeah,
stopping you from doing that either.
okay. And another big thing I see is they'll have like those questions, like 10 questions, and you say, are you able to work in America, blah blah. There's one that usually comes that's like how many years technical experience do you have? So does that mean like from high school, like senior year of high school, that's when I started learning graphic design? Or do I say from college till now? Like,
I don't know. That's like a silly arbitrary question that I haven't
Because
I'm
usually
sure
I
it's
just put
popping up
like
now, but that's weird.
I usually put like 7+ years because I obviously like I've been doing graphic design since high school. So it's like
Yeah.
so okay. So that's
Yeah, I mean that's fine. I think I would say I would do something of the same. Like again, these are questions that like in theory, like no one in the creative industry is really asking because now it's like, oh, I can go and learn a new program in 2 days.
yeah.
Like there's always been this disconnect in this process, I think, that is just so weird, but like, creatives are looked at as like these like weird species of jobs that like we don't really know how to approach, so we need to understand like what your technical, like no one's worrying about that. So yeah, whatever we think is right, honestly, I would say go with it.
Sounds good. And do you think
What
like
I
what
would say though is don't over exaggerate. Don't do
yeah.
yourself a favor, don't over exaggerate. Be honest with yourself and say, well, yeah, I started opening. I mean, granted, I started messing around in Photoshop when I was 13, but I wasn't sitting there tracking the years of. Think about like, sure, what they're asking is technical abilities. Think about what they're asking for of the role and how many years you have doing that. Right? That's probably a more modest way of doing it.
Yeah. No, 100%. Um what do you think about like websites like Indeed and stuff for graphic design? Or should I look into more design websites, I guess, that have like recruiters for designs, if that makes sense?
Um, I mean, it just depends on like it depends on what you want to do and or which kind of plays into what we've been talking about of like expanding on your design and your knowledge and figuring out like the type of work that you really enjoy, because for me it was always really important to go and work for big brands. So I would always go and look at companies that I really liked. So um I would go look at tech companies or companies like Netflix or companies like Coca-Cola or Pepsi or whatever. And I would go and see what roles they had open, in design. Nike, like I would apply to Nike every once a year, basically. And that's another way of doing it. I
Like
find
through
with
their
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I find, with sites like Indeed, you can have a mixed bag. You can find companies that are pretty good that are hiring. You can also end up finding your small mom and pop shops that don't really know what they're doing and they just need a graphic designer. They think that's going to solve all their problems. So like you got to be careful, but again, like there are things outside of, say, like Indeed. Obviously you have LinkedIn. I'm trying to think, there are sites like fuck, what is it called?
Glassdoor
uh
or Zip
no,
Recruiter.
not Glassdoor. No, 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 it's called, fuck, what was it called? It just got bought by Fiverr. It was more design. It was more like a creative focused.
Upwork?
No, 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 no. I have it on my website. One second.
Yeah.
Uh, call the design guy. Design internships. Uh, God, my site is not being indexed. How to become a graphic designer. Where did it go? Damn, my website is not being indexed. I have it here somewhere. I'll get to it. I'll find it while we continue chatting. But there are other sites that will have more creative focused jobs on it. For designers, for art directors, for photo editors, things like that.
And David, my friend, he used to use Upwork. Is that
Mhm.
do you think that's like a good way to start like exploring yourself, I guess? Because it's like freelancing and like getting different projects, but like I don't know.
Um, again, like, you know, yes, but you're gonna end up, what I think would happen is you're gonna end up just like in a mixed bag of stuff, right? Like you're gonna just be seeing like, oh, logo, yeah, I could do that. Um, and that you're just gonna go ahead and start making logos. Again, what I think is would be super like, don't worry about making stuff immediately right now. Go and expand and learn a little bit more about what it is you want to do. And then start to think about, okay, now like I feel like I really like this stuff. I really like this stuff. Now I want to start making stuff like that, you know? The website I was talking about is called Working Not Working. There's also, you can find so Behance does have a job board, AIGA does have a job board, Cora Float, Dribble. I'll send some of these over as references as well.
Awesome.
But there are those sites that are again more design focused. So alrighty. Nicola, it was lovely meeting you today. You have my email. I'll be sending all these notes over and I'll have some references in there that you should look. I actually might send over more references than necessarily notes because I think I want to just make sure that you're looking at a bunch of stuff and you'll have some links that you can actually use. But if you have any questions, you have my email. And yeah, it was lovely talking with you, and I hope speak to you soon. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. This is freaking awesome. And I honestly appreciate you taking your time and doing this for all these designers. Like that's
No
freaking
problem.
awesome.
No
So
problem at all.
I'll definitely
I
reach out to
enjoy
my
it.
buddies too. Let them know about you, you know?
Absolutely. That would be much appreciated.
Of
Thank you.
course.
And you have a great rest of your night. All right, Nicola.
You too. Have a good one.
Have a good one. Bye bye.